Welcome to the No Soundbites Allowed podcast on the Voss Political Commentary channel. Join us as we delve into the issues that affect our lives with more respect than a headline or a bullet point. Special thanks to our subscribers and advertisers for making this possible. And now, let's start with this episode's revelations. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us. That's right. This is Michael Voss, the Dragon of the Southern Tier, here on the No Soundbites Allowed podcast. I'm happy to be here with you, and you guys, you all make it worthwhile. You're the reason why I'm here every week, and I thank you for your participation and being involved in the process. Now, I want to talk about something today. It's been bugging me. I've been trying to do this article all week long, actually. And, of course, I'm talking about Brett Kavanaugh, Professor Ford, the sexual assault allegation that's been made against him that we're hearing about throughout the entire week. It's been all the news, and everyone's talking about this because it involves the Supreme Court nomination. And it's a big deal, and it is a serious issue. And let me first start off with, before I say anything else, number one. If you are a victim of a sexual assault, please absolutely go out there and take action. Do not let that go by. That is something that is very serious. I don't care if you're a male, a woman, a transgender, Asian, black, white. Doesn't really matter. None of that matters. Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, Conservative. None of that matters. Let's get that out first. Because this case, this issue that's been going on for the last week, I think is doing serious damage to a lot of people throughout this entire nation. And the first thing that I think needs to be very, very clearly said and very clearly stated is that if you are a victim of sexual assault, go out and take action. Make it public. Hold that person, that perpetrator accountable and bring them to the courts. Let the courts, let the legal system go forward and investigate that and hold them accountable and punish them for what they've done if that's the case. Now, that's one of the most important things that needs to be said that hasn't been being said throughout this entire case. I think it's completely lost out there, and we need to make that clear. You don't want to wait 10 years. You don't want to wait 15 years. You want to do this immediately. Don't let this person get away with that, and you will get support. Find an advocate and have them go there with you, support you through this process. I don't know of anyone who wouldn't support you in that kind of process to protect yourself and to make sure that that is not something that is allowed. We don't agree with that. I don't think anyone in America agrees with sexual assault, no matter how the media may want to portray this specific case. The honest answer is no one wants to see that happen. No one agrees with that. And I can tell you, if you pick an advocate, someone to back you, someone to support you, whether it's a certain police officer, whether it's a prosecutor, whether it's the DA, if they're not giving you that day in court, they're not following up on this, pick another advocate, go out there and make sure it is known. The best way to stop this and to make sure that people are aware of this, that it's happening and how to protect others from this is to go out there and say, hey, we're aware of it. Make the awareness, because these kinds of perpetrators exist in the shadows. And the best thing that could happen for them is no one hears about it. And it's not just protecting you, it's protecting others from that kind of sexual assault. Because if that person did it once, they will probably, and we see historically, do it over and over and over again. Harvey Weinstein is a great example. Over and over and over. Al Franken is another example. Over and over. So Bill Cosby, over and over. We need to stop these people at the beginning. Make it known. And I think that's a very important message, and I think it's a message that is not being heard right now, and it is not being clearly said. And I think it needs to be said very, very clearly. With that said, I also want to go into the fact that I think it's very important that we understand that this particular case of Kavanaugh versus of this accuser, actually, it's not even against anyone. It's the accusation and allegation that has been made by Professor Ford against Kavanaugh. That is not normal. And this is an abusive case. This is an abusive situation. And a lot of people may get somewhat upset. And I'm sorry if this is an emotional issue. It shouldn't be, but it has been made completely political and emotional, and it is meant to only do one thing, to achieve a political agenda. And I'm going to go over that and why I say that very clearly. But that's what's going on. This has nothing to do with women. It has nothing to do with women's rights. It has nothing to do with protecting women or attacking women. This is all about politics, pure and simple, with no concern for any of the lives that are being affected and how they're going to be affected forever. This is all about just politics. This is about Democrats winning and maintaining power. And I will explain what I mean by this, because it's a shame. It's a travesty of both our legal system and our nomination system, and just against the public in general. It's a societal issue. But let's make sure we understand what we're talking about, because there's been a lot of conversation going on and very few facts or very few accountability that's been put into this. So we know that for a fact in June 27th of this year, Justice Kennedy said he was stepping down from the Supreme Court, which gave the opportunity for President Trump to be able to nominate a new justice. That is a fact. And we know that President Trump had already had a list of individuals that he would go to as a pool to try and see which is the best nominee for the Supreme Court, already known. We know for a fact that as soon as Justice Kennedy said that he would not be coming back to the Supreme Court, that he was retiring, that the Democratic leadership came out and they blanket attacked for about 2 weeks the non-existent, unnamed Supreme Court nominee. And they guaranteed that they would oppose anyone that President Trump would name. And they accused this unnamed individual, this unknown person who had not been selected yet. They said that they would stop this nomination no matter what, that this person would turn around Roe versus Wade, that they would send the nation back to the 1950s or even beyond that, reversing all kinds of civil rights movements and actions and all of the progressive ideals that the Democratic Party has been moving towards in its drive to become more socialist. These are facts. We know that on July 9th, after Democrats had already been saying that they are attacking individuals for this nomination, we actually got a name. On July 9th, we found out that it would be Brett Kavanaugh, who is on currently the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, the second highest court in the nation, and has done over 300 cases, is widely regarded amongst his peers in the legal circles and amongst justices that he's a great judge, very fair. He's an originalist, much in the line of Scalia, and that Democrats hate his guts. And so that began the process. That was on July 9th. And so in the month of July, we then found out now that a letter was written by Professor Ford and received by Senator Dianne Feinstein somewhere around July 30th or the end of July or some point in July. And she received this letter, which made an allegation that Justice Kavanaugh, some 35, 36, 37 years ago, when he was in high school, approximately when he was 17, he had a sexual assault against Professor Ford, who at the time was 15. This is during high school. And she has never mentioned, and the reports have changed, but the initial statement was she has never told anyone about this until 2012 when she spoke about it to a therapist. And she has no recollection of where this happened, who was there, how she got there, how she got home. We've learned that since that she was drinking at the time, and she's not sure all the individuals involved. She initially stated that there were 4 men that were there, of which Kavanaugh is one of those 4. She couldn't name the other individuals that were there. That has since changed, which has gone down to 2 males, one of them being an associate of Justice Kavanaugh, Mr. Mike Judge, who then has refuted this actual event happening. But he was one of the 2 people who were alleged to be in the room during this assault and protected Professor Ford at the time when she was 15. And the event ended at that point. But she never told anyone about it, and no one knew about it until 2012. And at some point after that, well, let me continue with the timeline, actually. So we know that goes forward. So Dianne Feinstein receives this document. The hearings for the nomination on Justice Kavanaugh are scheduled to begin in September. And between August and throughout all of August, we see that Professor Justice Kavanaugh met with members of the Senate, including Senator Dianne Feinstein, who he met on August 20th. And they had a private meeting, as did many others, including Chuck Schumer and Cory Booker and Kamala Harris. They all were able to meet and speak with Justice Kavanaugh. During that meeting on August 20th, a month after Dianne Feinstein had received this letter making allegations of a sexual assault, she mentions nothing about it. Not a single word. That brings us to the hearings, which began on September 4th. Between September 4th and September 7th, Justice Kavanaugh went through the entire public hearings that many of us saw on C-SPAN and are available, being questioned, receiving over 1,300 interviews. Also, during that time frame and just prior to it, approximately 500,000 documents were provided to the Senate on all the cases that he had made, on public statements he had made, emails that he had made, speeches that he had given, and case hearings, over 300 cases that he had heard on and wrote opinions on. So this is all known. And this is more than any other Supreme Court nominee has ever provided. More documentation than I believe some reports have said, more than all of them put together, or at least in the modern era, all Supreme Court justices put together have not given as much information and documentation as Justice Kavanaugh has. That being said, also during that time frame, from September 4th to September 7th, 227 protesters were arrested and pulled out and had events during the nomination process. 227, more than any other number of protesters during a Supreme Court nomination ever. And most of them were women. Most of them were arguing about abortion, which had become the number one talking point amongst Democrat leadership, saying why they oppose Justice Kavanaugh. Number one issue. Although in all of the documentation, in all of the speeches, in all of the court cases, there is nothing that indicates that Justice Kavanaugh has any desire or intention to reverse Roe versus Wade. These are facts. These are the facts. Going further, we know that it was on September 12th that somehow the news media received a letter, the letter that Dianne Feinstein had in her possession that she did not show to any of the other members of the Democratic Party, neither senators nor anyone else. No one else had access to this letter except Senator Dianne Feinstein. And on September 12th, somehow the letter, it is leaked to the news media that she is in possession of the letter and that this letter makes an accusation against Justice Kavanaugh about a sexual assault. That begins the process we now see. And we know that once that was out, there was a lot of speculation about who wrote this letter, what did the letter actually allege, what were the details, and why was it not released to the public before that. From September 12th, we go to September 17th, when Professor Ford, on her own, goes to the news media and makes them aware that she had wrote the letter and the details of her allegation about the sexual assault. And at that point, she then also confirms that she had, in 2012, gone to a therapist, which was the first time she had ever mentioned this case to any human being, and mentioned the discrepancies of how many people not knowing where it was, not knowing when in time it had occurred. She didn't remember the year, the month. She didn't know where it was at. She didn't remember what day or week or any of that. She didn't remember any of the details on it other than she was assaulted by Justice Kavanaugh. This is what she has said to the news media. And during that process, between the 12th and the 17th, the Democratic Party has stated that there must be a hearing on this, that they should bring Professor Ford before the Senate so that they can ask questions about this serious allegation against Justice Kavanaugh, and that Justice Kavanaugh would be able to also be involved in hearings to present his side out of due process. That was the initial thing. That has then changed. It went from we should be able to hear her to, okay, we're able to hear her. Here is the date that we're going to have that hearing, to then saying, okay, well, there needs to be an FBI investigation. And that FBI investigation now has to happen before we can have Professor Ford make her comments, and that nothing can be done until then. And now even the most latest news is that Professor Ford is saying that she is afraid for her life. She's being threatened and it's being traumatic for her, and that she is not willing to speak on this, if at all possible, because she is having issues, traumatic issues from this, which is to be understood. I bring all of this up and bring this timeline out there. And you can look this up. This is all public information, but you can look this up and you'll see there's a lot of information here that is seriously in question and that we really need to concern ourselves about, because this is about due process. This is about not Professor Ford, but every other woman, every other individual that has a sexual assault. How we're going to see the next Supreme Court justice treated, how we're going to see our legal system change, because this is changing everything. And it's not being spoken about, but we are setting precedents here through this process, and especially depending on the outcome of this process. But before I go further, and I'm going to go into all of that in just a moment, but what I want to do is, now that we understand what I want to talk about and also what are the facts that we absolutely know without question, let me take a break, and then I'll come back and I'll explain why I think this is such a problem, regardless of what happens with the Supreme Court, that this is a major issue for America. And I'll talk about that in just a moment.
I ain't had you waste. I don't even remember how you taste on my lips. Used to be something I needed. Now I see I had a reason. I was bummed out, stressed out, yeah. Think you made me feel the best I had. For a minute I thought I needed you. Now I'm seeing through all of the reasons that I made up in my head. I'm breaking the habit. I'm breaking the habit. I'm breaking the habits that I had, 'cause look where it's got me. Searching for myself, didn't know I lost me. I ain't no saint. Let the devil have a way. I regret it every day. I was bummed out, stressed out, yeah. Think you made me feel the best I had. For a minute I thought I needed you. Now I'm seeing through all of the reasons that I made up in my head. I'm breaking the habit. I'm breaking the habit. I'm breaking the I'm breaking the habit. I'm breaking the habit. I'm breaking the I'm breaking the habit. I'm breaking the...
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us back at this special episode of the No Soundbites Allowed podcast. This is your host, Michael Voss, the Dragon of the Southern Tier, and I am happy to be here with you. And I wish I had a better subject to talk about, and I will later in the week, but at the moment we're talking about Justice Kavanaugh, his nomination to the Supreme Court, and the allegation of sexual assault brought to him by Professor Ford. Now, let's step aside from the Supreme Court nomination for a second. As I mentioned when I went through the timeline of all of this, there's bigger issues that are being addressed here and need to be addressed here. And the first one is we're watching, our society is changing, the legal system is changing. And this is very much a progressive goal and ideology. And you've seen it under the hashtag #MeToo movement, where allegation is supplanting the entire legal process. If someone is accused of something, it has now become justifiable that that accusation is all that is needed to convict the person and to punish that individual, rightly or wrongly. Okay, and that's a problem because I understand when someone has done something wrong and they should be punished for it. I have no problem with that. That's why we have a legal system. You go through the process. That's why we have laws. And we have punishments that are on the books that say, okay, this is how we punish a person for doing X, Y, or Z. And that's a good thing. But what we're seeing is that under the allegations, especially started under Me Too, which I'm not against Me Too. That's a great thing. Bring up the allegations of individuals who've committed sexual assault and let's hold them accountable for that. But what we are seeing is that this has been a wide spectrum that just about anyone, remember Senator Al Franken, removed from office, has never been charged a day in his life. He's not going to court on this. We're seeing Keith Ellison, who's been accused of, well, actually, Keith Ellison I'll get to in a second, because it's the exact opposite is happening there. But we see individuals who are accused and removed from office or otherwise punished in private life. There's never been a single court case. We don't know if they're justified, if they're correct, or if they're not. Now, I understand many of these cases have 6, 7 more people than that who have come out and had accusers against them, and that adds to the credibility. But again, this isn't a court case. We haven't seen this adjudicated. These individuals have been judged by the media and punished because of their actions or the alleged actions that have happened against them without any proof. That's wrong. Because at this point, what it comes down to is anyone, especially if they are a male, especially if they're a white male, especially if they're a Republican, that they are automatically going to be seen as wrong and they're going to be punished for it. I mean, look at this. Under the political ideology of the progressive movement, men are bad automatically. If you're a white male, you're evil automatically. And if you're a Republican, you're demonic automatically. That's without having done anything. I mean, we've heard that from Senator Hiroma, who says that, men should just shut up and that they have to get with it and that they're wrong. That's what she said. Okay, look it up. It's a quote. She's coming out and saying, well, men have no voice because men are automatically wrong and women are automatically correct. And therefore, we have to believe every woman in every case, in every allegation, no matter what. And we must punish the man without any proof. And that's just the way it has to be. Because otherwise, anything else than that is sexism, which is actually wrong because it's a definition of sexism. It's preferring one person over another based on their sexual gender without any proof or any reasoning other than their actual sexuality, sex itself. And that's wrong. We have a rule of law for a reason, because if you don't, you have abuse of the legal system. And that only divides people and causes more problems. It makes it more difficult. There's more retaliation that happens because of that. There are more people who are going to be fearful because of that. It's going to drive people, especially predators, deeper underground hiding, because the mere hint of an allegation is all that is necessary to destroy someone's life forever, rightly or wrongly. And that's an important thing that we have to keep in mind. Right or wrong, what are we doing? Think about it. Can you imagine that if we had turned around and said, well, women don't have a voice, they can't speak, they just have to deal with it. It's the change. That's what we're saying. And I mean, that's a great way of looking at a lot of these things. if we reverse the group that's being put into this, so you take men, reverse it from men and women, but put it to women and men, and we're saying we're going to silence all women and that they're automatically wrong, no one would agree with that. Why would we agree with the counter argument? It's the same thing. It's the same issue. It's still sexism. Same thing with racism. And if you're talking about whites versus blacks or blacks versus whites, it's the same thing. It's the same issue. And we have to address it in that way, because when we start changing that and saying we prefer one over another, all we're saying is this abuse is good, that abuse is bad. In other words, we're creating a hierarchy where abuse is allowed at the end of the day. And anyone who can be abused under that kind of system one day will be abused. If you're the one who's making the accusation today, tomorrow you will be the one who will be suffering the accusations. That is just the way it is, because that's how corruption works. That's how the bias works. Eventually, you're going to be the one who's going to be facing that same bias under the same terms or similar terms. And it happens over and over and over again. And we're seeing that right now. So I have a big problem with that we're seeing an allegation that's just less than credible. To be absolutely honest, we have to be honest about this. It's less than credible. The person who's making an accusation, I mean, imagine, and I had a conversation about this actually on Monday. I was talking on WUTQ, which is in Utica, New York, one of the talk radio programs, and we were discussing this issue. One of the big questions is, so what if one day someone alleges that we were talking with one of the radio hosts, Mr. Rocco Loduca, and it was alleged. Someone said, okay, what if someone alleges that Rocco, you were photographed with a Confederate flag and you're a racist or a KKK symbol? And they would say you're a racist. Not that he had, but 10 years ago, someone saw it and said that Rocco did it. And then he would be punished for that. People would label him as a racist and then they would take him out. Now, mind you, this never happened. This is just a supposition. What if kind of situation. And you could say that. I mean, what if, for some reason, someone wanted to make an accusation against me? I don't know. They could say almost anything. But what if they did? With no proof. What about you in your life? You listening to this right now. If someone came up and said, 15 years ago, you did X. Whether you did it or not. Without any proof, just the allegation. And they say, well, you should be fired from your job. You should lose your home. You can't marry this person or that person. Your kids need to be punished or taken away because you are accused of having done something. That's what we're building right now. That's the case that Democrats are making right now. All in the purpose. That's the precedent that they want legally set for not only the next nominee for the Supreme Court's, but also for everyone else. Everyone else is now subject to this. And by the way, it can go back to when you're in high school. Anyone can be accused of anything going back to when they're in high school at this moment, possibly to as young as 15 years of age, and you are held accountable to it, even if you happen to be 50, 60, 40, whatever. No matter how old you are now, we can go back all the way back in time to when you're a teenager and you're held accountable for every action you did there, whether or not you actually did the accusation that is made against you. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine how much that can be abused? Ex-girlfriend, ex-wife, your competitor at work, a business competitor who's owns a business and trying to compete on the same product line. I mean, there's just no end to the ways that this can be abused. And we're supposed to assume, according to progressive politics, the social justice, that certain people are more important than others and have to be believed and acted for more than others. Therefore, if you're a woman, well, you're above a man. And if you're black, well, you're above a woman and a man. And if you're gay, you're above someone who's black, a woman, or a man. And if you're transgender, you're above all of them. And then it just gets split down more and more and more from there. So imagine that someone who happens to be, I'm just throwing out a supposition here, just a what if. So what if you are up for a promotion at your job, and so is a trans individual? That trans individual alleges that you, 20 years ago, were, I don't know, jaywalking, crossing the street, had a flag of some, you watched Dukes of Hazzard, and you had a car, a little model car of the Robert E. Lee from that show. And they're saying, well, you support the KKK. You're an evil racist. So I should have the job and you should. And then your job fires you because you're a racist. You are accused by a trans individual. We have to believe them. Doesn't matter if there's no proof and no way to prove this. You're a racist because that trans individual said so. And we have to believe that person before you because you're not as high ranking in the micro categories as social justice allows. And therefore, the trans person trumps you and you have to be thrown out of your job because of it. That's the consequence of what we're seeing right now. And that's wrong. That's wrong for everyone. And that's what's being enforced here. And that's a danger to our society. And we seriously have to consider this. This is, Rocco Loduca, when I was on WUTQ, mentioned that this is no less than McCarthyism, a neo-McCarthyism. And I agree with him. This is a new form of McCarthyism, where just because you're accused of something, you're punished for it. And we saw this in America before. We've been down this path with the whole McCarthyism movement of just labeling people and stopping them from being able to work and isolating them and bloody well near just throwing them into jail and destroying lives. People committing suicide because they can no longer work, feed their families, because they're so persecuted publicly. We're in that phase. We're building that back up. And it's one of the worst phases of American history. It's absolutely terrible and terrifying. And I don't know anyone who would agree with this kind of thing. And again, this isn't about emotion. When we get blinded by the emotion, just like we did in McCarthyism, when we're blinded by the emotion, we fail to see the consequences of this illogical action. This kind of racism, sexism, this kind of prioritizing of individuals, one group over another group, all of it for the mere purpose of political gain of a very small elite group of individuals, and it benefits no one in the nation. It only makes things worse. That's the danger that we're looking at here. But I'm going to take another break because there's even more about this that we really need to address. And I'm going to come right back. And I'm looking forward to hearing your comments about this. And again, I'm not saying that Professor Ford is right or wrong. That's not what we're talking about. That has nothing to do with this at the moment. What I'm talking about right now is what are the consequences of what we have done, the precedent that's being set. But we'll take a quick break and then we'll be right back.
I say, lady, I'm feeling like we ain't got no damn patience. Excuses why we cannot do this face to face, and then we cry, wonder why we ain't on the same damn page. If there's one thing I know, it's that this world keeps turning. No one seems concerned. Whoa, that this world keeps turning. That's one thing I learned. 'Cause mama don't sleep at night since the sun done up and down. Ain't no brother's keeper, and no one looking out for the sisters either. And these families ain't no families. No one giving second chances. I don't understand why. It seems like this world keeps turning. No one seems concerned. Yeah. Lately I'm feeling like you don't see me the same way. Excuses, but it's written on your face. another night. This time we've been wasting. No, I don't understand why we could have it all and throw it all away. Just cause everything don't go our way. Why? Why? Just take a look outside. People losing lives. I'm just trying to see this world is much bigger than you and I. Maybe I'm feeling like we could make this all okay. No excuses, girl, we need to find a way and take our time and do this right before this all fades away. Cause if there's one thing I learned, it's that this world keeps turning. If there's one thing I learned, it's that this world keeps turning. No one seems concerned. It's that this world keeps turning. No one seems concerned. It's that this world keeps turning. No one seems concerned.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us back here at the No Soundbites Allowed podcast with your host, Michael Voss, the Dragon of the Southern Tier. And so we're talking about the Kavanaugh versus Professor, I lost her name there. Ford, Professor Ford. So, because there's a lot about this, and most of it has nothing to do with Justice Kavanaugh. Almost none of it has to do with Professor Ford. This is all about the politics. Because let's remember, at the end of the day, and actually at the beginning of the day, this is all about the Democrats having said repeatedly that they would do anything that it takes to stop this nomination, or at the very least to delay it until after the midterm elections, because Democrats believe that they will win the House, they believe they will win the Senate, and therefore they can control who may or may not be able to get into the Supreme Court to fill the 9th seat. In fact, Democrats have also said, and you can check the reports on this, there's an allegation or a statement out there, a rumor out there, that Democrats are looking at if they can win the Senate and if they can win the House, they're willing to delay the nomination of a Supreme Court justice until after the 2020 election, where they hope to be able to have someone to beat President Trump and have a Democrat in. That is the goal. At the end of the day, their best case scenario is they get to take back the White House and pick a progressive justice, a judge, to be able to take the 9th seat of the Supreme Court and therefore change the laws in America. That is their goal. That is the stated and implied goal of the Democratic Party from the beginning to the end. And everything that they're doing has been towards that. They have been trying everything they can to delay this process, this nomination process, to be able to change the opinion of the public, to try and sway the way the election is going to go. Hasn't been working. According to the latest polls that have been out, we see that the, quote, blue wave has been shrinking and shrinking every time we've been seeing a new poll come out, and every time we see the results of primaries across this nation. That's not happening, but that's what they think is going to happen. And this is what they expect to see happening. But we have to wonder about this, because when the Democratic Party comes out and says that they're looking for the justice here, you got to remember, this is also the same party that in August, when allegations were made against Representative Keith Ellison by his ex-girlfriend, accusing him of sexual assault, of battery, and having 911 a 911 call, which confirms the accusation and the allegation that Mr. Ellison was violent against a woman. That was on August 15th of this year. Then that's been swept under the cover. You notice the media is not talking about that. They haven't asked, where is that case? Why is it not moving forward? We have seen people come up against, and the woman involved in that case has come out and said very clearly that the Democratic Party has been against her in this, reminiscent of the actions of the Democratic Party against the women who accused Bill Clinton of sexual assault. But we have heard nothing about that. So again, this comes back to this idea, or this belief I have, that the Democratic Party is actually perpetrating the worst kind of victimizing that could ever happen. Whether or not Professor Ford is correct in what she remembers, which is in question, because her memory has changed multiple times on what happened and when it happened and who was involved. And I can tell you that while I have never suffered rape, of all the women I know who have and have talked to me about it, and there aren't a lot because it's not a very positive subject, I've yet to know one who hasn't remembered everything. And I know in other victims of trauma, including my own. I can tell you about the trauma of when I was in Moscow and there was a coup going on. I remember every detail of that. That was back in the 90s. It's over 20 years ago. I can tell you actually it was about 30 years ago. And 20 years ago, when I was in my car accident, motorcycle accident, and I had my leg shattered. I can tell you details, number of details about that traumatic event. And I'm not trying to compare, but I'm telling you that this doesn't seem to match up with the facts that we have available to us at this time. But let's say that she's completely correct. What we're looking at is her being victimized. When she first made that letter and made it aware to Senator Dianne Feinstein, she said she didn't want her name released. She wanted this to be a private matter. She didn't want to bring it up. And Dianne Feinstein, a month later, had the ability to have a private conversation with Justice Kavanaugh to bring up this question of this sexual assault and these allegations. But instead, what we saw happen is nothing was ever mentioned, and somehow the news media were leaked a document that she only possessed, that's Dianne Feinstein, which started this whole process. We've learned that somehow the woman, Professor Ford, who didn't want her name mentioned and didn't want to make this public, did get a lawyer for some reason. And she also went out there and took a polygraph test for some reason. I don't understand why. I know a lot of victims of rape and a lot of people who've been in trauma, their first thoughts are not, let me go get a lawyer and also let me take a polygraph. Why would you? Why would you need to do that? On something that they are mentioning that is so private they don't want their name mentioned. Why would you get a polygraph for something that you never expect to have your name mentioned about, nor are you going to be presented to the public? Why would you do that? Why would you get a lawyer if your expectation is that you are never going to be brought up, that you are never going to be named, that you will never be involved in the process? If you're not expecting to be in front of the public, why do you need a lawyer? Why do you need a polygraph? Those are big questions. But I got a little sidetracked here because I'm talking about this question. Dianne Feinstein is directly victimizing, the Democratic Party is victimizing Professor Ford because they released her name when they weren't supposed to. And I say it's the Democrats because they're the ones who had possession of the document. No one else had it. Dianne Feinstein did not give it to the Republicans. She didn't give it to the FBI. She didn't give it to anyone. She held it. That's it. So this thing, when it got leaked out, could only come from the Democratic Party. And they would only do that because they're seeking a political gain. All other efforts to try and stop the Kavanaugh nomination failed. The public sentiment was in favor, as was all the legal sentiment on this nomination, as it had been since it was first announced back on July 9th. So they needed some way to stop this or to delay it, and thus came out the leak of this sexual assault letter that was supposed to be kept private and no one else was supposed to know about it. That only comes from the Democrats. That is victimizing a victim. If she is absolutely, I'm not saying she is or isn't, let's say she is 100% correct in her memory of this event and the allegation that she's making, then she's a victim. She's just been victimized by the Democrats by revealing who she is and revealing this letter and starting this process. She's further victimized because Democrats have used her as a poster child of both the social justice ideology by using her as an example and making her a well-known name across the entire nation. That's not what she wanted, according to her own statements today. And now we have Hollywood jumping into this. Hollywood, having not heard her testimony, having not had her do the Senate hearing yet, has already made a video from MoveOn.org that's saying that they believe her. Wait a minute, believe what? You know, there's a bunch of Hollywood actors prominent names who are coming out and saying, well, we believe her completely. She's absolutely true and we support her. Okay, well, stop for a second. What do you believe? She has a conflicting story that has no corroboration. What do you believe? So you believe one of the versions of her stories that she has put out there. Okay, fine. You have that right. You believe that without any proof or or probable cause for something that happened over 35 years ago. And you're saying that no one else needs to be heard, that this is done. That's the position that Hollywood is taking, that this is all done. She's a woman, and based on the hierarchy of social justice, that's all you need to know. She's a woman. She's made the accusation. It must be true. And even if it isn't true for her, it's true for some woman somewhere in the world. And therefore, we have to support this. And absolutely every man has to be punished because an allegation has been made. That is the logic that is going on right now. That is the legal precedent that is being made right now. We are changing the legal system from the courts and law enforcement to media. Media is becoming our court system, and public opinion, which is very moldable, is being used to be able to punish individuals without ever having them without giving them the ability to defend themselves. I mean, that's a major, look at the full court press, CNN, MSNBC, the various newspapers, all coming out, making accusations against Justice Kavanaugh and talking about the accusations. They're now promoting the idea, well, now Justice Kavanaugh has to resign. Just so, I believe that came out of the New York Times. There was an article saying, well, Justice Kavanaugh should resign and a new nominee put in place. Why? There is no proof. We have no proof for this. It is a generalized accusation that is questionable at its best. And just because one woman has made that accusation doesn't mean that he is mandated to resign. No, that isn't how the system works. And it should never be that way. I said this, and please, you can go back and you can see my comments on Al Franken. I didn't think he should resign either. This isn't political for me. It isn't right or left. I don't think it's true that just because you're accused of something, that you should be kicked out of your office, that you should be fired, that you should be punished because someone made an accusation. That's not how our legal system works. And that doesn't benefit anyone. In the long run, it just makes it worse. We have less trust, less faith. We have a worse legal system that is more prone to abuse and corruption. And ultimately, that hurts everyone at every single step. And seeing that this is being done, that we're seeing the Democratic Party, Dianne Feinstein and others, use this to advance their political goals, to win an election, to promote certain ideas that they have that otherwise cannot win. Social justice is not a winning ideology. It is not something that is gaining ground across America, and it is not what we're basing laws on or our legal system on. And I think personally we shouldn't. But that's besides the point. They're not gaining ground. The Democratic Socialists are not winning. Whether the Democratic Party wants to go to socialism or not, America doesn't agree. We've seen that in vote after vote. And we've seen that in the feedback that we get if you listen to the news talk shows and you're listening to Twitter and Facebook, and all the ways that the public has to make a comment. The public rejects all of this, but yet the Democrats are moving forward with it because that's what they want. And they're doing it at any cost necessary. They will give up anyone. They gave up Al Franken after trying to defend him and keep him. They've hidden everything on Keith Ellison, but I guarantee you, if that gets to be resurge in the public knowledge, they'll give him up in a heartbeat, because what they care about is they're going to advance their goals. And that means that everyone else's goals, who they're supposed to be representing, are meaningless and tossed to the wayside. This isn't about representing your constituents. This is about them gaining power. And that's a troubling thought. And they're willing to use a potential victim, Professor Ford, to be able to advance those goals. If she wasn't a victim before, and let's say that this is not something that actually happened, which may or may not be true, but if it isn't, they turned her into a victim because now they've used her for their gain. And I guarantee you, once this is all done, they're going to toss her to the wayside, as they have done in previous cases. We've seen this happen over and over again. But that's just what the Democrats do. And I mean the leadership here. I keep saying Democrat. I mean the leadership, because we've seen that over and over again. And this is troubling to me. I mean, it should be troubling to anyone. This is not a good thing. There is no positive that's coming out of this. What's the best case scenario? I mean, really, ask yourself that. What is the best case scenario that the Democratic Party wants to see come from this? Who wins? Do women win? No, they really don't. Because they've established that a system has now been put in where accusations are all that's necessary. And while it may seem like that's a great thing for women, eventually someone's going to make accusations against the women. And eventually that means that those women are going to be punished without ever having been to court or to hear their day or to provide any proof. It's going to happen. So that doesn't help women at all. And it doesn't make men any more willing to support women and defend women when they know that at any moment someone's going to come up with an accusation from 30 years ago that doesn't have to have any proof, and that man is going to be punished for it. You're not going to have support. Nobody wants to step out and put their neck out there when they know that someone can just make up something from 30 years ago, and that's it. You're done. Your life is destroyed, whether or not it actually happened. Let's think about the elections that are going to come up. How many people are going to want to try and run for the first time, to put themselves out there into the political field and say, hey, I want to lead because I have some great ideas, because I believe there are certain issues that are not being addressed. I have a better way to help out the nation, whether it's local, federal, national, doesn't matter, state, it doesn't matter which level. I want to go out there and I want to put these ideas out and I want to support them. And you have hanging over your head this thought that anyone can come up with any accusation, true or not, from any amount of time into your past. And guess what? That will derail your life, because you're never going to walk this way. Even if that person is found to have lied, you still have every single headline. And remember, and the media knows this is true. Politicians know this is true. I'm a political commentator for over a decade, and I know for a fact it's true. In the industry, everyone reads the headline. No one cares about the retraction. If you are dragged through the mud because someone made an accusation about you and you have been labeled as a sexist or a racist or ageist or whatever is out there, and they've labeled you with this, that's going to follow you for the rest of your life. And the fact that there's a retraction, oops, we're sorry, it wasn't exactly true. Well, no one is going to know that. When they do the Google search for you for your next job, when they go and you try and do another, if you stay in politics and try and run again, no one's going to see anything except, hey, this is the racist. Here's that sexist. Here's that ageist, that anti-trans, that anti-black, white, whatever. That's all they're going to see. They're not going to see anything else. How does this not chill the people who would go forward? And how does it not allow someone to be corrupt about who is going to be able to go ahead? You want to talk about the 1%? This creates the political 1%. Only those who are approved by the major political party would be able to come out there and make any kind of attempt at elected office, because everyone else will just be accused of something randomly and thrown out and have their lives destroyed. That's not what America's about. So when I listen to all this, when I'm listening to the Kavanaugh and Professor Frost, yeah, I have a lot of issues because I like facts. I like details. I like to know and understand what's going on. I've been doing that for 12 years now. And I don't see that. I don't see a consistency. I don't see details. I don't see anything that's being confirmed. This is not an FBI issue, by the way. I was just talking in WNBF today, sending in some text, as the host of that show was talking about this and some of the callers. And I wanted to remind everyone, remember, this is not a federal issue. This is a local issue, local police. It's 36 years ago with teenagers who self-admittedly were drunk. No one has proof of it. This isn't a legal case. The FBI doesn't deal with that. And if we suddenly have the FBI, here's another thing that needs to be addressed. Look at what we're changing on our legal system. If we have the FBI investigating ancient issues that are local issues that have nothing to do with the federal government, we're expanding the power of the FBI. We're creating a police state. If they're able to investigate individuals going back 35 years on matters that have nothing to do with the federal government, then what can't they do? And who else can they investigate? If they can do it to a Supreme Court nominee with a stellar record and no problems in his history that has gone through 6 FBI background checks previously over the last 25 years of public service, if he's already survived all that, then please tell me, name someone, Joe Average, walking down the street that'll be able to not have the FBI go into their lives. Who can defend themselves against the federal government, the Federal Bureau of Investigations? And how can that? Imagine the Federal Bureau of Investigations came after you tomorrow and there were public headlines about it, and right or wrong, everyone knew about it. How's that going to affect your life? Now imagine that. That's the scenario we're creating. We're growing a secret police almost to go along with the social justice prioritization of various categories of people, not individuals, categories of people, to promote a very, very specific political agenda of a very elite small group of people. There's your danger. Now, no one else is talking about these things, at least not in the way that I'm speaking about it. You're not hearing that in the media, but we should, and we should be aware of it. I don't know if Professor Ford is innocent or guilty, and quite honestly, I don't care. I really don't. And I don't mean to say it in a callous way. I do care about women who've suffered sexual assault, and I do believe that we should protect them and that they should come forward so that we can protect them and so that we can take those predators out of the public. I absolutely believe that. But I don't believe this case, because in this case, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't. It doesn't seem credible to me. When I put all the facts together and I look at the timeline of how everything has happened, and I look at the political gain, and I see the destruction of our society, our legal system, based on this, no, I don't think it's correct. I don't think it adds up. It doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense to what I've known in my lifetime and what I've been told. So it just doesn't make any sense. So no, I don't believe it. But that doesn't matter if I do or I don't believe it. What does matter is what's going on in this case. What are we seeing? She's been given every opportunity to have a private conversation with the Senate, to have a public conversation with the Senate, to be able to do it anywhere that she wants, at any time that she wants. I mean, no one else gets that. Name another Senate hearing where the person who's going to the hearing gets to choose all of that. They get to choose when they have the meeting, where they get to have the meeting, whether it's public or not. No one gets that. We're subverting the entire government to a political ideology. And that has negative consequences. That is nothing but rampant abuse waiting to happen. That's corruption. When one person can tell the government in its totality and its procedure to throw that all out because my ideology trumps the law, that's dangerous. But I tell you what, you may not agree with all of this. You may not agree with any of it. But it is a point of view. It is a issue. It is a question that we need to contemplate, because there are absolutely consequences to this. And these consequences are absolutely going to happen. And I advise us, whether we agree or disagree completely, we need to discuss this. And we have to evaluate those consequences. And that is irregardless of whether Professor Ford is correct or incorrect. It doesn't matter at this point. It doesn't really matter, because the consequences are going to happen regardless of whether she is or is not telling the truth. And that's something that's very important. If she's correct, absolutely, Judge Kavanaugh should not be nominated. Absolutely, I agree with that. But that's not really what's going on now, is it? If we're honest, that's not really the question. Knowing the Democrats, the political system, doesn't really evaluate or care about, is it correct? Is it true? They care about, do we win? And if we have that mentality going on, no one's protected and everyone's in danger, ultimately. But these are my thoughts, and I'm very happy to hear what everyone else thinks. Please leave your comments, leave your thoughts about anything. We have a new intro in the show. Please let us know about that. And we're looking forward to your comments, and we'll talk. Obviously, we're going to be talking more about this as we go forward in this process, probably by Monday at least. But until then, I thank you all. I hope everyone's well, and we look forward to speaking with you again all very, very soon.
I bring the matches, you bring the gasoline. Let's do it right, oh let's make a scene. There's no survivors, no survivors on this road we're on. Lead me astray, you little pussycat. Let's take this day and make it a disaster. Oh, I know what you're after. Happily ever after ain't a joke to you. You stilled the hand, warm the knife. Yes, Lord, will you please spare this life? He said no. There's no survivors on this road. Bring the matches, you bring the gasoline. Let's do it right, oh let's make a scene. There's no survivors, no survivors on this road wrong. No survivors, no survivors on this road.